Hey everyone. So this week we are going to move forward with our Python work so that we can actually get some output from the file that we have created. Last week we sort of got so far as opening up our data source, creating a new data file, or making the script create a new file, and looking at the column headers in our sort of original data source. And so this week our goal is to get to the point where we can actually at least be filtering our data by start station ID, so that we can again do that filtration process on basically any number of rows that we want. So you can see here I've got Aptana kind of up and running. Python scripts is the name of the folder that I'm using to store my file. And once this loads up, we'll see where we stand. So at the moment, I've done, essentially what we did for this week, which is I've imported the CSV library. Let's just add a comment to this. Import library with recipes for dealing with CSV files. I have opened my CityBike source data as a read file, so that I can access that data. I have also opened a new file, which will actually create this file as a write file. So that's where I'm eventually going to put my output. And I have converted my CityBike source to a so-called dictionary reader. Okay, so this is a method that is part of that library of CSV recipes. And you can tell because in the beginning here, it starts with CSV, right? So you can think of that as like a directory where basically the code is saying, it starts with CSV because it's saying go to the CSV library. In there you will find a recipe called dictreader, and the ingredients for that recipe that I want you to use this time is source file. Take the results of running that recipe on the ingredients of source file and put it into a box that is labeled CityBike Reader. Okay, we've done, there's actually an extra step here, which is, which we hadn't done yet, so I'll get rid of that. But short version, we're going to do the same thing for our output file. And we know that CityBike Reader, one of the side effects of using this method is that, or this recipe is that it gives us a way to access the column headers. And so whoever wrote that recipe, that dictreader recipe, decided that they would give that part of the work that it would do is it would find the column headers and it would put them into a field labeled field names, right? So they decided to call it field names instead of column headers. And we can access that by using this dot structure. So we can say, look, go to the box that is labeled CityBike Reader and get out of it and print the thing that is field names. So I can see this in action if I run my file. So I'm actually going to do a save here. So again, always keep an eye out for that asterisk, because if you have that asterisk present, then any changes that you've made haven't yet been saved, which means that they won't be reflected when you run your file. So it can get kind of frustrating if you feel like, why am I making changes and nothing's happening? If you haven't saved, then that Python command is not going to pick up those changes. So again, I come here, I need to use my change directory, my CD. I'm going to go to the desktop. I do an ls for list. I'm going to, again, change directory into, I called my folder Python scripts. I'm using my tab key here so that I don't have to type the entire thing, which is a really handy shortcut. Again, I do an ls, and you can see right now, because I haven't run this file yet, all I have is my source data and my Python file. So I'm going to run my Python file like this, and so far I'm getting what I expected. It's printing out the column headers, and if I go and look at the folder itself, I will see that there is, in fact, a new CSV file in there called filter station rules. I can look at this just in a text editor, and of course there's nothing in it because I haven't written anything to it yet, but that's what we will get to. So having come this far, the next thing that I want to do, there are a couple of things that I want to do. So one thing I want to do is I want to do the piece that I kind of took out just a second ago, which is that I want to create a, so I'm actually going to come back up here and edit my outline, because I no longer am satisfied with printing the column headers. I want to write the column headers to my output file. I also want to go through my source data line by line and write, I'm going to write all rows with station. Well, I'm going to start by saying I'm going to go through my data line by line. Let's start with that, and then we'll go to the next thing. Okay, so as I said, generally what we want to do with that overview is you always want to, ideally you actually sketch out what the entire program does. Because we're doing this in kind of an iterative way, we're going to, sort of piecemeal update what our objectives are, but always putting them at the top there, because otherwise it's surprisingly easy to kind of get lost and forget what you were trying to do in the first place once you're finished debugging and making sure that things actually work. So here I'm going to sort of in advance, because I want to write the column headers to my output file, just the same way that I have this this city bike reader. I have an option to create a so-called writer, right? So I've got a source file that I have read, and I have created a corresponding reader using that as the ingredients. I am going to I've created an output file that I am writing to, and I'm going to create a corresponding quote-unquote writer that's going to let me write data to that file in an organized way. So I'm going to say create writer to use with output file. And I'm going to use a naming convention, or I'm going to sort of follow a naming convention here. I'm calling it city bike writer equals, again, CSV, because this is actually something that's found in the CSV library. And I'm going to say csv.writer, and with my output file, right? Because my output file is the one that I'm writing to. Okay, so now to test that this works as I expect, I could go ahead and run this just to test that this doesn't have any errors. So maybe I'll do that. Who knows, why not, right? Okay, so I'm getting the same result, which is unsurprising because all I've done is create the writer. I haven't actually used it to write anything. But now I'm going to modify this statement. I'm going to say write column headers to output file. And so I'm going to say here, I'm going to get rid of this print command and say city bike writer dot write row. Okay, so that's the method, the recipe. City bike writer dot field names. So I'm going to go ahead and test this, and if this has worked as I hope, oops, make sure I save. If this works as I hoped, then I will no longer see output here of the column headers or field names, because they should actually be in my target file, right? They should be in that file that I created. Oops, so let's run this. Oops, come on. I seem to have lost my cursor here. Hang on a second, I'll be right back. Okay, so I don't know what went wrong there, but I just restarted Aptana. Hopefully it's fine. So again, I'm going to say Python 3 and my file name. And it looks like I have a problem. So this is something, as you're working on your own scripts, you may get errors like this. It's not a big deal. As I said, 99% of the things that hold up your code are just going to be typos. And so it says name error, name city bike writer is not defined. Okay, so what that means is that somewhere I have referenced a variable that I have yet to introduce, right? And again, this is typically a case of misspelling, and that misspelling includes capitalization, right? So again, computers, the most anal retentive copy editors you ever had. Everything has to be referred to in precisely the same way, including capitalization. So what I'm going to do, and actually what I recommend to you all, is I'm just going to copy and paste, right? So rather than trying to sort of eyeball the differences, like I can just copy and paste it, right? Because I'm referring to the same thing. And that's a super easy way to make sure that I'm able to do so accurately. So I'm going to do this. Again, that's the no news is good news thing. And so now what I can test and see, hey, did this actually write anything? And I'm going to go ahead and just open this with text file. And indeed, it does seem that I have succeeded in getting my column headers into this file. So that's good. Next, of course, I want to actually get my data in there. And so that is going to mean introducing one of our, we only have two real grammatical structures in programming. We have something called for loops and another thing called conditionals or if statements. So when we come back, we're going to look at how we can set up a for loop with a so-called if statement that is going to let us go through our file row by row, check what the value of start station ID is. Most importantly, compare the value of start station ID to my desired start station ID. And if it matches, write that data, write that particular row to my output file. And if it doesn't match, I'll just do nothing. I won't write it to the output file. And by that process, I will end up filtering my data. So I will see you all back here in just a moment.